The harsh whispers of judgment rippled through Portland, Oregon like a storm threatening the horizon as Josephine O'Malley clutched her shawl tighter around her swollen belly, feeling the weight of 100 condemning eyes upon her back. It was Sunday, May 12, 1878, a day that should have been filled with worship and community, but instead became the day her world crumbled around her. "Miss O'Malley," Reverend Thompson's voice boomed through the silent church, his finger pointing accusingly at her 5-month pregnant form. "You have brought shame upon this house of God. Unwed and with child, you are no longer welcome among our congregation." Josephine stood frozen, her 22-year-old frame trembling beneath her Sunday best. The father of her child had been a traveling salesman who had promised marriage before disappearing with the spring thaw, leaving nothing but empty promises and growing life within her womb. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the cavernous church, "I have nowhere else to go." "You should have thought of that before you sinned," Mrs. Whitaker, the Reverend's wife, hissed from the front pew. "We cannot allow such moral corruption among us." Tears burned Josephine's eyes as she turned and fled, the heavy wooden doors of First Presbyterian Church slamming behind her with finality. Rain had begun to fall, soaking through her thin dress as she stumbled down the muddy street, her small room at the boarding house no longer an option now that her condition was public knowledge. The small town of Portland was growing, but not large enough to hide her shame. As she wandered toward the edge of town, her worldly possessions in a small carpet bag, Josephine wondered what would become of her and her unborn child. The rain turned to a downpour as she reached the outskirts of town, where the Wild Rose Ranch sprawled across the rolling hills. Her legs ached, and her fingers had gone numb from the cold. A small barn stood near the road, its door slightly ajar, offering the only shelter in sight. Josephine slipped inside, the sweet smell of hay and horses enveloping her as she sank onto a bale in the corner, finally allowing her tears to fall freely. Her sobs echoed in the empty space until a deep voice startled her. "Madam, you all right in here?" She looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted in the doorway, broad-shouldered and crowned with a wide-brimmed hat. As he stepped closer, the lantern light revealed a man perhaps 5 years her senior, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners and a day's worth of stubble on his strong jaw. "I'm sorry," Josephine scrambled to her feet, wincing at the ache in her back. "I didn't mean to trespass. I'll go, in this weather." The man's voice was warm with concern. "I don't think that'd be wise, especially." His eyes drifted to her pregnant belly, but unlike the townsfolk, his gaze held no judgment. "I'm Ethan Irving," he said, extending a calloused hand. "This is my ranch." "Josephine O'Malley," she replied, hesitantly taking his hand. "I just needed somewhere to rest for a moment." Ethan nodded, studying her tear-stained face. "Looks like you need more than a moment's rest, Miss O'Malley. You're soaked to the bone." She shifted uncomfortably, one hand protectively covering her belly. "The church, they cast me out, said I was sinful. Nowhere will take in a woman in my condition without a husband." Something hardened in Ethan's expression, a flicker of anger quickly replaced by resolve. "Well, that's just foolishness. God's love doesn't stop at church doors." He removed his coat, draping it gently around her shoulders. The warmth of the wool and the unexpected kindness made fresh tears spring to Josephine's eyes. "Every Sunday, a few of us gather here at the ranch for our own kind of worship," Ethan continued. "Nothing fancy, just reading from the good book and sharing a meal afterward. If your church won't have you, then worship with me. You're welcome here." Josephine stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied simply. "I know what it means to be alone when you're most in need of company." Something in his voice suggested he spoke from experience. "Come on up to the house," he said, picking up her carpet bag. "My sister Emily helps run things, and we've got a spare room that's been sitting empty too long. You can stay until you figure out your next steps." "I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will," Ethan insisted, his tone gentle but firm. "No one should be alone in a storm." As they walked toward the main house, Josephine felt something she hadn't expected to find today, a glimmer of hope, warm and fragile as a candle flame in the darkness. The Irving home was modest but well kept, with cheerful curtains framing the windows and a welcoming glow emanating from within. Emily Irving proved to be a woman of about 30, with the same kind eyes as her brother and a no-nonsense manner that Josephine found instantly comforting. "Of course you'll stay," Emily declared after Ethan explained the situation. "That church has forgotten what Christianity means. Now let's get you into something dry before you catch your death." That night, as Josephine lay in a real bed with clean sheets, her belly full of Emily's rabbit stew, she stared at the ceiling and wondered at the strange turn her life had taken. Cast out by those who claimed to follow God's word, she had found sanctuary with strangers who seemed to understand it better. The next morning, Josephine woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of birdsong. For a moment, she forgot her circumstances until a flutter in her womb reminded her of the life growing within. She dressed quickly in the simple dress Emily had lent her and made her way downstairs. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, studying a ledger, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up when she entered, his serious expression melting into a warm smile. "Good morning. Sleep well." "Better than I have in months," she admitted. "Mr. Irving, Ethan, please." "Ethan," she corrected herself. "I'm grateful for your kindness, but I can't impose on you indefinitely. I need to find work, somewhere to live before the baby comes." Ethan closed his ledger. "As it happens, we could use some help around here. Emily manages the house and the accounts, but she's been saying for ages we need someone to help with the cooking and mending. The hands are tired of my stew." "You'd hire me. In my condition." "Your condition just means there'll soon be another pair of hands around here, even if they're tiny ones for a while." His eyes crinkled with humor. "I'm offering fair wages and that room upstairs for as long as you need it." Josephine hesitated, wary of charity disguised as employment. "I don't want pity." "It's not pity I'm offering, Miss O'Malley. It's an opportunity for both of us." Over the following weeks, Josephine settled into life at Wild Rose Ranch. She discovered she had a talent for cooking that delighted the ranch hands, and her nimble fingers made quick work of the mending pile that had accumulated in the bachelor household. Emily, initially reserved, soon became a friend, teaching Josephine about managing a household and preparing for the baby's arrival. Each Sunday, just as Ethan had promised, a small gathering of people arrived at the ranch, a collection of misfits and outcasts who had found their own way to worship. There was old Mr. Jenkins, who'd lost his hearing in the war and couldn't follow sermons anymore. The Hanson family, whose daughter's crippled leg made the church steps too difficult to navigate. And the Wilcox brothers, whose dark skin wasn't welcome in the town's white congregation despite their deep faith. They would gather in Ethan's front room, where he would read from his mother's Bible, its pages worn from years of handling. There were no fire and brimstone sermons, no accusations of unworthiness, just stories of love and redemption, followed by a shared meal where laughter flowed as freely as coffee. "This is what I always thought church should be," Josephine confessed to Ethan one Sunday evening as they washed dishes together after everyone had gone home. Her belly had grown rounder, the baby more active, kicking against her apron as she worked. "My mother taught us that God is found in kindness more than in grand buildings," Ethan replied, carefully drying a plate. "When she and Pa died of the fever 10 years back, the church in town said it was God's will, like that was supposed to comfort us. It was our neighbors bringing food and helping with the ranch that showed us what God's love really looks like." Josephine nodded, understanding blooming between them. "My father was the same before he passed. He always said religion without compassion is just empty words." As June turned to July, and July to August, Josephine's feelings for Ethan grew alongside her child. She found herself watching him as he worked with the horses, gentle but firm, his strong hands capable of both breaking a wild stallion and carefully mending a bird's nest that had fallen from a tree. In the evenings, he would often read aloud while she and Emily sewed, his deep voice bringing life to stories of far-off places. For his part, Ethan seemed equally drawn to her. He would seek her out during the day with small gifts, a wildflower he'd spotted on the range, a ribbon from town that matched her eyes, or a wooden cradle he'd crafted in the evenings. "My father made one for each of us," he explained shyly as he presented it to her. Seemed only right to continue the tradition. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Josephine felt the baby shift restlessly within her. "Active tonight," she commented, placing a hand on her swollen belly. "May I?" Ethan asked hesitantly, his hand hovering above hers. She nodded, guiding his palm to where the baby kicked strongest. His eyes widened in wonder as he felt the movement, a smile spreading across his face. "That's something special," he whispered. "It is," she agreed, acutely aware of his closeness, the warmth of his hand against hers. "Josephine," he began, his voice serious. "I know you've had your trust broken before and I don't want to rush you, but I need you to know something." She held her breath, heart fluttering nervously. "These past months with you here have been the happiest I can remember in a long time. You've brought something to this ranch, to our home, to me." He met her eyes, his own full of emotion. "I'm falling in love with you, and if you need time or don't feel the same, I understand. But I wanted you to know." Tears sprang to her eyes, but they were different from the ones she'd shed in the barn that rainy day. These were tears of joy, of relief, of possibility. "I thought it was just me," she whispered. "I've been afraid to hope, to believe I could find love again after everything." Ethan gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "You deserve all the love in the world, Josephine O'Malley." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, filled with promise and hope under the vast Oregon sky. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, Josephine felt not shame but pride in her resilience, in her growing child, and in her heart's capacity to love again. The peace was shattered 2 days later when Reverend Thompson arrived at the ranch, his face stern beneath his black hat. Josephine was hanging laundry in the yard when his buggy pulled up, and her hands trembled as she recognized him. "Miss O'Malley," he said coldly, not bothering to dismount. "Word has reached me that you've taken up residence here, corrupting yet another household with your presence." Before she could respond, Ethan emerged from the barn, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. He moved to stand beside Josephine, a silent statement of support. "Reverend," he acknowledged with a curt nod, "what brings you all the way out here? I've come to warn you, Irving. This woman has been cast out from our congregation for good reason. Her immorality—" "Stop right there," Ethan interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "You're on my property now, and I won't have anyone speaking that way about a lady I respect. She's unwed and with child. And that makes her unworthy of kindness, of God's love." Ethan shook his head. "I don't recall Jesus turning away the sinners and outcasts, quite the opposite, in fact." The Reverend's face flushed with anger. "You dare lecture me on Scripture? I've heard about your Sunday gatherings, Irving. Mockeries of true worship. Our gatherings welcome everyone, Reverend. Perhaps that's the difference." Ethan's hand found Josephine's, squeezing it gently. "Now, unless you have actual church business with us, I'll thank you to leave." The Reverend's gaze darted between them, settling on their clasped hands with disgust. "So that's how it is. She's ensnared you too." Josephine found her voice at last. "You cast me out when I needed help most, Reverend. Ethan and his sister offered me shelter and dignity. Which of you do you think truly follows Christ's teachings?" For a moment, the Reverend seemed struck silent. Then, with a huff, he snapped his reins and turned his buggy around, calling over his shoulder, "The town will hear about this." As the dust settled behind the departing buggy, Josephine sagged against Ethan's side, trembling. "I've brought trouble to your door." Ethan turned to face her, both hands now holding hers. "You've brought nothing but goodness to this ranch, Josephine. Don't let him make you doubt that." That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Emily surprised them both. "I think you should get married," she announced matter-of-factly, passing the potatoes. Josephine nearly choked on her water. "I beg your pardon, not for the town's sake," Emily clarified, "for yourselves. Anyone with eyes can see how you feel about each other. The baby will be here in a month or so." "Why wait?" Ethan set down his fork, looking thoughtfully at Josephine. My sister's never been one to mince words, but she has a point. I meant what I said the other day, Josephine. I love you. I'd be honored to be a husband to you and a father to your child. But people will think, let them think what they want, Emily interrupted. Since when do we care what Portland gossips say? Josephine looked between the siblings, overwhelmed by the possibility before her. It's not that simple. The baby isn't yours, Ethan, taking on another man's child. Family isn't just about blood, Ethan said gently. It's about choice, about love. I'm choosing you, both of you. 2 weeks later, on a crisp September morning, Josephine stood in Emily's bedroom, wearing a simple white dress that Emily had altered to accommodate her advanced pregnancy. Her auburn hair was adorned with wildflowers, and her cheeks were flushed with nervous excitement. "You look beautiful," Emily said, adjusting the flowers one last time. "My brother is a lucky man. I'm the lucky one," Josephine replied, smoothing a hand over her belly. "A few months ago, I thought I'd lost everything." The wedding was small but joyful, held in the front yard of the ranch with their Sunday gathering serving as witnesses. Judge Parker had ridden out from Portland to perform the ceremony, having known Ethan's parents and holding no truck with Reverend Thompson's rigid morality. As Josephine walked toward Ethan, who waited beneath an arch of roses Emily had constructed, she felt her baby kick vigorously, as if offering approval. Ethan's face when he saw her was a picture of awe and love that she knew she would remember for the rest of her days. "Dearly beloved," Judge Parker began, his voice carrying across the ranch yard, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other the meaning of love and acceptance. The vows they exchanged were simple but heartfelt, promises to stand by each other through all of life's storms and sunny days alike." When Ethan slipped his mother's ring onto Josephine's finger, she felt the weight of history and hope combined. "By the power vested in me by the state of Oregon, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Parker declared. "You may kiss your bride, Ethan." Their kiss was sweet and lingering, the cheers of their friends a joyous backdrop to the beginning of their life together. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing, though Josephine mostly watched, her condition making vigorous movement difficult, and a feast that showcased her culinary talents. As the sun began to set, Josephine found a quiet moment alone with her new husband, both of them watching the golden light fade over the fields that were now their shared home. "Are you happy, Mrs. Irving?" Ethan asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "Though I admit I'm a bit nervous about what's to come, the baby," his hand gently rested on her belly, "we'll face it together. Not just that, the town, the church, they won't magically accept us because we're married now." Ethan turned to face her fully. "Then we'll make our own community right here, a place where everyone is welcome no matter what." 2 weeks later, in the early hours of a cool October morning, Josephine went into labor. Emily sent one of the ranch hands galloping into town for the midwife, while Ethan paced anxiously outside the bedroom door, wincing at each of Josephine's cries. After 12 hours of labor, just as the sun was setting, the wail of a newborn filled the house. Ethan, finally permitted to enter, found Josephine exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "Come meet your son," she whispered as he approached the bed cautiously. The baby was tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and fingers that curled tightly around Ethan's when he offered one. "He's perfect," Ethan murmured, overcome with emotion as he sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "What shall we call him?" "I was thinking Samuel after my father," Josephine suggested. "Samuel Ethan Irving." "Samuel," Ethan repeated, testing the name. "I like it." The first few weeks with baby Samuel were a blur of sleepless nights and learning curves, but Josephine marveled at how naturally Ethan took to fatherhood. He would walk the colicky infant for hours, singing old trail songs in his deep voice until Samuel settled. He changed diapers without complaint and proudly showed off his son to anyone who visited the ranch. "You'd never know he wasn't yours by blood," Emily remarked one afternoon as they watched Ethan showing Samuel the horses from a safe distance. He loves that boy something fierce. He is his, Josephine replied simply, in all the ways that matter. As Samuel grew from newborn to infant, Josephine and Ethan's love deepened with each passing day. The ranch prospered under their combined care, and their Sunday gatherings grew larger as word spread about the welcome everyone received at Wild Rose Ranch. One Sunday in early spring, when Samuel was nearly 6 months old, a surprise visitor arrived during their service. Mrs. Whitaker, the Reverend's wife, stood hesitantly at the edge of the gathering, her usual stern expression replaced by one of uncertainty. Josephine spotted her first and, handing Samuel to Ethan, made her way over. "Mrs. Whitaker, this is unexpected." The older woman looked around nervously. "I heard about your Sunday meetings, about how you welcome everyone." "We do," Josephine confirmed, wondering at the woman's presence. Mrs. Whitaker twisted her hands together. "My sister is coming to stay with me. She lost her husband last year and now she's with child. The Reverend says she can't stay in our home unless she gives the baby up once it's born." Tears filled her eyes. "I can't turn my back on her, but I don't know what to do." Josephine's heart softened. "Bring her here, we have room and we understand what it means to be judged." Relief washed over Mrs. Whitaker's face. "Thank you, I'm sorry for how we treated you. I was wrong." "We all make mistakes," Josephine said gently. "It's what we do afterward that matters." By the time Samuel's first birthday arrived, the Wild Rose Ranch had become known throughout the county as a haven for those in need. Ethan and Josephine had added rooms to the main house, creating space for expectant mothers with nowhere else to go, teaching them skills that would help them build independent lives. On the evening of Samuel's birthday celebration, after the cake had been eaten and the guests had gone home, Ethan and Josephine sat on their porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Samuel slept peacefully against Josephine's shoulder, his chubby hand clutching his father's finger even in sleep. "I have news," Josephine said softly, her free hand finding Ethan's. "I visited Dr. Collins in town yesterday." Ethan looked at her with concern. "Are you ill?" "Not at all," she assured him, a smile playing at her lips. "Quite the opposite. It seems Samuel will be a big brother come winter." Joy spread across Ethan's face as the meaning of her words sank in. "Truly, we're having a baby." "We are," she confirmed, laughing as he whooped loudly enough to make Samuel stir. You'll wake him." "Sorry, little man," Ethan whispered, gently stroking his son's hair. Then to Josephine, "I love you more than I have words to say, Josephine Irving." "And I love you," she replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Thank you for saying worship with me that day in the barn. You saved more than just me and Samuel. You saved my faith, my hope." "You saved me too," he admitted. "I was just existing before you came along. Now I'm truly living." As night fell fully over Wild Rose Ranch, Josephine reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Cast out by those who should have shown compassion, she had found not only shelter but love, purpose, and community. The church that rejected her had inadvertently led her to her true home. 7 months later, on a snowy December evening, Josephine gave birth to a daughter they named Hope Emily Irving, a testament to the feeling that had carried them through their trials and would guide them into the future. "Our family," Ethan murmured as they gathered around the fireplace that Christmas Eve, Ethan with Samuel on his lap, Josephine nursing baby Hope, and Emily smiling contentedly from her chair. Around them, the house that had once known loneliness now vibrated with love and possibility. Outside, snow fell gently on the land that was their sanctuary, covering the Wild Rose Ranch in a blanket of pristine white, a canvas for the future they would build together, one day at a time. Over the years, as their children grew and their family expanded, Josephine never forgot the lesson she had learned that rainy day when Ethan found her in his barn. That sometimes the greatest act of faith is offering kindness when the world expects judgment, and that true worship is found not in grand buildings or rigid rules, but in the simple act of saying, "You're welcome here."